Hello, everyone, and welcome to our special Google Hangout on Air. I'm Senegal with the New Mommy Media Network, and we produce audio podcasts for new and expecting parents. And we love to do these Google Hangouts. And we've been doing several with the Parent Connection and Scripps Health, and this is another one of those Hangouts. Today, we are talking about puberty, birth, and conception, and how we approach these topics with our young girls. Because as you know, this can be kind of a difficult conversation to have. So if you haven't checked out the Parent Connection yet, please do. We love partnering with them. They always have such great information for parents in the San Diego area. They have play groups that you can participate in and just a lot of great resources for parents. So be sure to check them out at sandiegoparent.com. Look into their membership and see if it's something that's right for you. So we're going to go ahead and meet our expert that's joining us today. It's Dr. DeFreitas, and I know she has these chats quite a bit with the Parent Connection and the parents that participate in that program, and so we're real excited to have her on our Hangout today. Dr. DeFreitas, welcome to the Hangout. Tell us a little bit more about yourself and your experience.
I am a pediatrician. I've been so for about 34 years now of my life. I've learned a lot more about pediatrics through my own children than I did in medical school. So I have bring to my practice a lot of experience, and I love to talk to parents about their children.
So Dr. DeFreitas, why do you think we as parents have a hard time with these chats and talking to our kids about difficult topics such as puberty and sex and things like that?
We're never taught how to talk about this very sensitive topic to our children. Our parents didn't do it, and those who did it, we weren't too sure, we don't remember, and there's no really good education about how to do this. So we kind of learned by default. I'll tell you a quick story. My own daughter was 10, and it was her time to have her health class at her school. So I looked at the curriculum, like all good moms or fifth grade girls. We go look at the curriculum, and I said, oh, I don't think so. That doesn't look like a good curriculum. So I told the teacher, if you want, when you're going to do the class, you let me know. I'm a busy mom. I'm a doctor. I work. I have a kid. I have 3 kids. I have a dog. I have a house. I have a husband. But for my girl, I'll make time. So you let me know when the class is, and I'll come and I'll just stand in the background. I'll just answer a few questions, and I'll be there for moral support. This poor teacher, he took one look at me and says, here, lady, you do the class. I panicked. I said, no. He said, yes, you can do it. I said, how do I do this? And I was a pediatrician, and all I could think about, oh my God, this other moms who don't have my background, they must be just as lost as I am. And that was the beginning of my passion of trying to help other families deal with this very complicated topic about the birds and the bees in puberty.
So the big question I think a lot of parents may be asking themselves is, how young can we start, talking to our kids about this? Is there, I look at my twins are about 2.5 years old right now, and I often wonder, what do they understand? What do they not understand? Obviously, that's probably too young for birds and bees, but I think we're always asking ourselves that as parents, like, when are my kids ready for that next talk, whatever that talk is? So what would you say, regarding puberty and birds and the bees, when is a good time to start approaching that with our children?
Okay, so let me give you an overall picture, because whether you know it or not, that education about sexuality and the way our human body works has already begun. From the moment your child was born, you were already making decisions about your child's sexuality. What is our first identity? Either a boy or is it a girl? That is a very basic part of who we are. But it really starts around age 4 or 5 when they're curious about the human body, and they ask questions about, why am I a boy or why am I a girl? And at that point, and you have done a lot so far, believe it or not, everybody gets an A+ up to age 3 or 4 when they've potty trained their kids, they've taught them how to dress, how to use the bathroom. All of that is perfect. Everybody gets an A+. But when we come to age 4 or 5 and they start to ask, where did it come from? How does the baby get out? How does the baby get in there in the first place? That's where we all get nervous. And many parents will postpone these conversations until puberty. Because at puberty, what happens? All these changes start to happen. And we have no choice. We have to address it because the girls are budding, the boys are they're growing. And that's the point where everybody feels as though I need to do something. But the education should start really between ages 4 and 5.
So let's talk a little bit more about the talks that we need to have with girls, okay? And puberty is the first thing that kind of comes into my mind. So how do we start to have this conversation? Is there a more natural way of bringing it up? Should we be looking for signs or something?
So one of the things that I do tell the parents is that start earlier than puberty. Don't wait until puberty to start the conversation. And what you do is you try to find what we call teachable moments, times during everyday life in which you can start to approach the questions and start the conversation going. With young children, there are 3 basic questions that we have to make sure that they know before they go to kindergarten. The questions are, where do babies come from? How do babies get out? And the most difficult one is how the babies get in. Luckily, Sunny, we know from our experience in pediatrics that is the order in which children want to know those questions. First, they want to know, where did I come from? And people get all flustered and they think, oh my goodness, where did I come from? I got to talk to them about sex. I got to talk about venereal diseases. I got to talk about unwanted pregnancy. No, children just want very simple, concrete answers. So the answer to that question, where did I come from? You come from a very special place inside the mommy's body, which is called the uterus. And you can even show the baby where the baby comes from. And it's like the human body's nest.
All right, so let's talk about menstruation and periods for young girls. This can be, talking a little bit about overwhelming them. And I can remember back to when my mom had the discussion with me, and it can be kind of a very scary thing because you don't really know why things are happening. You're not used to seeing blood unless there's a major problem, right? So how do we start that conversation with our girls without overwhelming them and making them feel like this is something that's bad?
So let me give you a little brief run through of what I do and how I talk to the young girls about periods and all of that happening. I try to get them to think about puberty is a time in life. It's like a bridge, and we walk over this bridge at the beginning, and at the end of the bridge, we have our adult body. And puberty takes several years. And it's the reason that puberty happens is so that later on in life, you have your adult body. And the difference between the mother's adult body is that we can conceive children, we can carry babies. And then I bring them back to the very simple explanation. How does a bird make a nest? So a bird makes a nest by putting twigs and feathers and eggs and puts the nest outside on a tree and lays its eggs in the nest. So that's a bird. The human body is a lot more sophisticated. We carry our babies inside of us. Our nest is inside our body because we're more special. And the way the body does it, it puts together inside the uterus our own little nest. And this nest is a cushion of blood and tissue. And the body starts practicing building this special nest inside your body, but it also realizes it doesn't need it. So when your body realizes it doesn't need the nest, it lets go of all of that blood and tissue, and it comes out of your body through a special opening between your legs. You want to use the correct words. You do want to use the word vagina. You want to say that it's private. And then again, you stop talking.
Well, it's true. It's true because we don't like that silence.
Yes, and you give them a chance to absorb that information and let them sit with that information. And what's the first thing that a girl is going to say when she thinks she's going to have blood coming out of her between her legs? Oh, that's gross. I said, well, it may be messy, but it's healthy. It's normal. It happens to me. It happens to your aunt. It happens to all girls.
Now, I know you said earlier that we don't want to overwhelm them, and having a really long conversation about this is probably not the best route to go. We may want to do that as parents because we just want to get it done, right? But that's not the best way for our children to hear the information. Would you say that it's a bad idea in the beginning, or maybe not a necessary idea, to connect periods to how our baby's born? Is that too scientific? Because in my mind, I'm thinking they should know that, but maybe that's too much information.
Well, usually by the time they're in puberty, it's going to come up. So whether you have talked about it or not, they're going to know that. So let's go back to those 3 basic questions that we talked about at the beginning. Where do babies come from? We said from that special place inside the mother's body, which is the human body's nest called the uterus. The next question that children want to know, how does it come out? And believe it or not, that's their mentality. That's the order in which they see. So how does a baby come out? Let's address that one. One of the first things that I say is, how do you think the baby comes out? To give the child a chance to express themselves and see what their ideas are, what misconceptions that they have. Some children will say it comes out through the belly button, or maybe do they poop it out? And you can say, no, it comes out through a special opening between the woman's legs. You can say the vagina if you're comfortable with that, and that's private. Again, reinforcing the fact that that is private information. The next thing that they say, well, how did the baby get inside there in the first place? And that's the $64,000 question. That's the conversation that parents most dread, because that's having to explain what sex is. And I have heard all different variations of how to do this question, and all different concerns about losing their innocence. I call it losing their ignorance. But talking to children about how sex happens has to be done in a very careful and comfortable manner at a time in which you think your child is ready. Puberty is a good time. If by puberty your child doesn't understand the basic concept of sex, you're behind the 8 ball, and you really have to be the one to talk to your children. Would you like to hear the conversation?
Sure, absolutely. Give me an example.
All right. So let's suppose we wanted to talk to the children. We said, well, first of all, I say, well, how do you think a baby gets inside a mother's body? Well, I don't know. I said, well, let me explain to you. The mother's body has a special place where a baby grows. And you have to think about a baby as this beautiful picture. It's like a puzzle, but it only has 2 pieces. One piece of the puzzle comes from the father. It's called the sperm. The other piece of the puzzle is called the egg, and that's already inside the mother's body. These 2 pieces of puzzle have to come together inside the mother's body. And if everything is just right, those 2 pieces of puzzle come together and a baby starts to grow. So how does daddy's piece of puzzle get inside mommy? Daddy's piece of puzzle is called the sperm. And imagine, our bodies were made to fit together. That's how we were created. The father's private body parts, you have to wear the word penis. By then, everybody should have known the name of their private body parts. The father's private body part, his penis, fits inside the woman's vagina. And while this is happening, the sperm leaves the daddy's body, goes inside the mommy's body. And if everything is just right and these 2 pieces of cells, these 2 tiny pieces get together, a baby may start to grow. When 2 adult responsible people share their bodies in this way, this is what we adults call sex. And then you stop. Give them a chance to giggle, give them a chance to laugh, give them a chance to say anything that they want to say, and just stop the conversation at that point. Usually when I teach this in my classes, there are roars of giggle. It's like everybody breaks out in a giggle, the moms are sweating it, they're relieved, all this tension gets out, and you're done. And then you review again. This is private, this is adult information. There's a lot more to learn. We want you to treat it with respect, and you can add all your values and your principles at that time too.
As you were talking, I was thinking of another conversation that maybe may not be as difficult to explain, but for I know one of the conversations I'm going to have with my young girls is their growing breasts and what happens with that. You know, it's all kind of the puberty conversation.
Right.
Is that something that you would say is a separate kind of conversation from having your period, or okay?
It's all the same. Thank you for pointing that out. It's all the same because all of the changes that are associated with puberty are getting your body ready for later on in life, if or when you choose to have a child. So ask your daughter, so why do we grow breast? It's getting ready for later on in life. And what does breast have to do with babies? Well, of course, the human body develops breast so that later on you can feed the baby. And actually, that is a very good entrance because most young girls, 8 or 9, understand that concept and are very comfortable with the idea that you breastfeed. So that's a very good segue into continuing with the changes associated with puberty. You grow breast, you get a little bit taller, your hips get a little wider. Why do they get wider? Because that's where your special nest is, that's where your uterus is, where you will carry your baby. And then halfway through puberty, usually around age 12 or 12 and a half, is when most girls may start having their first period. But it can happen as early as 10, and it can happen as late as 16. So there's a wide range of what's normal, and nobody can tell you for sure when it's going to happen. I tell the girls, your body is this amazing creation that will just fall into place and everything will happen at the right time on the right rhythm. Okay.
When it comes to having these conversations, is it important for a mom, if at all possible, to have the conversation? Is it awkward for dad to be in the room? What do you say to that?
Many times what I have seen in my experience, I've been teaching this class for maybe 20 years now. And many times what I have seen is that, of course, the mothers are much more comfortable talking to the girls about periods. The sex conversation is a little bit more complicated for mothers, but talking about periods is much more comfortable for mothers. Girls would be mortified if a father were to talk about it. And yet every so often there's this amazing father who is able to do it, or it's a single dad, and they will find an aunt or a female role model who will come and talk to the girls. For the boys, we also see it go both ways. We have a class for boys too, and many of the fathers come to the class, and the fathers tend to do the boys. But many times too, single moms or moms who are very connected to their sons will be the ones to talk to their boys about the changes associated with puberty.
One of the things that I was thinking about as you were talking is, I wonder what some of the common, let's call them mistakes or missteps maybe, that parents make, that something comes out of their mouth and like, oh, I really wish I wouldn't have done that. What would you say are some of the things that parents do, maybe because they're nervous, they don't really know what to say? What mistakes do parents commonly make in these types of conversations, would you say?
I think the main thing that I see parents do is trying to give too much information at once. They get nervous and they talk and they talk and they talk and they talk, and the kid is 3 sentences behind and it's all going over their head. And then what happens is they said, oh, well, I did the talk, I'm done. And they think that a one time you're done, you can wash your hands and forget about it. But it is such a complicated topic. Again, you have to repeat it and bring it in a little bit more. The other thing, a big mishap that I see parents happen is not talking at all. They freeze and they don't know what to say, and they just let time go by. And then by that time, the child himself has figured out the information or has gotten it from peers, and then they don't want to talk because they're the ones who are embarrassed. So too much or too little is the big things that I see happening with this information.
You had mentioned earlier, and I just want to touch on it really quick, that it's important to call body parts what they're actually called. And I know that a lot of parents like to have cutesy names for things. Is that something that could be a struggle later down the road when you're trying to have these conversations?
You know, it's always best to start from the very beginning with the correct body parts, the correct names for different body parts. For the boys, it's the penis and the testicles. Those seem to be the easier ones. For the girl, it's more complicated. The correct name for the private body part for a girl is your vulva. So your vulva is your private body parts. The vagina, which gets an awful lot of attention, is that tiny little opening and only that little opening. Okay? But the private body parts for a girl is the vagina. You have the clitoris, they have the urethra where they pee, the vagina, and the anus. We have the breast. Everybody says boobs. They have all sorts of different words, but the breasts are the correct words. And if you start with the correct words, you don't have to backtrack yourself again when they get into puberty. You don't have to say, oh, well, guess what? That's not the correct way. This is the correct way. Well, but you said it was this. No, it's this. You lose a little bit of trust.
Yeah.
But I must admit, even for me, it was difficult. It was not easy. And I struggled. Even when I was teaching this to other parents, I could hear myself tremble, and my voice would tremble, and my hands would shake a little bit. And it's not easy. Sometimes you have to practice it, like with your partner or your spouse, or even with a girlfriend. Try to practice how to say it. Sometimes getting groups of mothers together. It's like what we do. We do it in groups with mothers and daughters together. So we all can share and laugh and giggle together and get some of this nervous energy that we have around this topic and try to make it as comfortable as we can for our girls. We also have, there are also some good books out there. The American Girl book the American Girl Company makes a very good book called The Care and the Keeping of You. It's an excellent book. For this young age group from 8, 9, and 10. Make it special. Get your girls a little bag, have some little special little case where she can put her pads, show her how the pads work. So there are a lot of things that we can do to make it very special when the conversation comes. And again, it's not just one conversation, a lot of small little ones.
I love the idea of practicing. I never would have thought of that. It seems like it should be such an easy thing. We talk to our kids, day in and day out, and you would think that it would be something, easier to, talk to our kids about. But you're right. It's one of those things, and I'm just tensing up. We haven't had to have any conversations with our kids yet. So this is good practice for me. I'm glad we're doing this hangout before I actually have to implement any of this stuff in my own house.
With your 5-year-old, it's time to get the conversation going. And let me give you a tip about the conversations. One of the best ways to do a conversation, especially if you have many children, I like to separate them and do it one-on-one, just because it's a good little attachment. And before having the conversation, I always recommend to the parents, go and do something fun, one-on-one with your child. Let's suppose with your 5-year-old, go to the park, have some fun time together. And then start the conversation by saying something like, so-and-so looks as though she's having a baby. Have you ever thought about where that comes from or what's happening with her? And offer some open-ended questions. Another good way to have this conversation is in the car, because in the car, nobody can go anywhere. Also, you don't have to make eye contact. And sometimes you hear questions coming from behind, and you just answer the questions simply and keep driving forward. And for many families, that's a very comfortable way of doing it, because otherwise they leave and they get distracted in the car. Nobody can go anywhere. And sometimes you can get some really good conversations in the car.
Well, those are some great tips. We're actually running out of time. I wish we could talk about this more. I know this was just kind of an introduction to some of these topics, and you mentioned some good resources, so we'll be sure to put that on the episode page for this hangout, so parents can perhaps check, take a look at some of those books and some of those other resources. But thanks so much for being with us today, and then for everyone who's watching, of course, we appreciate you hanging out with us today. Again, this is a special Google Hangout that we are doing with Scripps Health and the Parent Connection. So be sure to check out the Parent Connection at sandiegoparent.com. And then also be sure to check us out at newmommymedia.com. All of our podcasts are available on our website. We've got free apps. We have more of these Hangouts that are available. We do product reviews, so a lot of great information for parents out there just like you. And if you really like today's Hangout, just share it with another parent that might be able to benefit from it. And we'll see you next time.